So my hope is that you not only are listening with your head tonight, because we'll go over some information about sciatica, what it is, what it isn't, what's the anatomy, what can cause sciatic pain. Now, we will talk a little bit about kind of the do's and don'ts. How do you prevent sciatica? How do you stop irritating some of this nerve? And what can cause some of those things in our postures, our positions, things like that. And then lastly, I'm going to show you three, like the big three stretches. There's a lot you can do with sciatica, and I would tell you, hey, refer to my home rehab kit workshop that is already uploaded. It was last month on the third Tuesday of the month. That home rehab kit is a wonderful tool if you have sciatica. But let's jump into it. The sciatic nerve ultimately must be irritated in order for you to have true sciatica. I can't tell you how many people come into my office thinking they have sciatica, and it's truly not sciatica. They have pain in their leg maybe, or their hip, maybe just even in their back, and they think they have sciatica. So your spine has nerves that come off the lumbar spine, the nerves that come out, right, in that lower aspect. And there's actually nerves that come off of the sacrum. On the inside of the sacrum, they come through here. So these nerves all come together and they form the sciatic nerve. The sciatic nerve goes through this sciatic notch right here, and then it comes all the way down your leg, all the way down to your big toe or pinky toe, you want to say that. So sciatic nerve is created by the lumbar nerve roots coming together. They've come together kind of in the front here. They come down and through this little canal right there and come down your leg. Sciatica is inflammation or irritation on any of these parts of that sciatic nerve. Could be at L2, could be down at L5, it could be in the sacral area. Any part of that nerve, when it gets inflamed or irritated, can cause pain down the leg, even down to the foot. What sciatic nerve problems can come up with be a lot of different places. Depends where the sciatic nerve is irritated, but typically it's pain down the back of the leg, usually below the knee. So what sciatica isn't usually is pain that may just radiate into the hip or even just down into the thigh. It may not be the sciatic nerve. It actually could be this called your SI joint. But true sciatic pain means that the nerve itself is the irritation, and that nerve has enough pressure or inflammation in it that you'll feel it down the leg, probably to the foot. That's true sciatica. The things that will irritate the sciatic nerve are a number of things. Number one, well, if your spine has degeneration, meaning that the discs in here are depressed or compressed, then there's less room for those nerves coming out of the spine. So the nerves in the spine themselves can lose space where they come out, and that will happen when you have degeneration, meaning your discs have dehydrated or thinned out, or arthritis forms that pushes back into those nerves. Those can definitely be causes for sciatica. A subluxation, the misalignments that we correct in our office, predispose a lot of that from happening. So if you have a misalignment, the first thing that happens is a restriction of motion, a lack of good motion. And that subluxation, if not corrected, will start to create a lack of movement in the disc, which causes it to thin out, and ultimately the body will try to stabilize that with arthritis. So if you go to the doctor and the doctor says, yep, you've got sciatica. Oh boy, what do we do? Well, there's lots you can do, but the real question is what caused it? Well, you might have arthritis, sir, or you have a disc protrusion. All those things happen because you had a subluxation. Subluxations can be silent. The misalignments of your spine and restrictions that happen due to many stressors throughout your life will cause those nerves to become irritated. And you might not even know it until it's too late. Unfortunately, if you just mask the pain, if you just put a Band-Aid on it or doctored it up when it really hurt, your spine may decay to a point where a chiropractic adjustment doesn't relieve the pressure. So we want to try to teach you, and hopefully those you care about, how do you prevent the spine from deteriorating to a point where you need a surgical intervention to decompress that nerve. That's first getting checked to see if you have a subluxation. Number two, moving your spine properly to make sure that you keep motion, because motion gives vitality to your discs and keeps that space very large so that those nerves don't get compressed. How do you prevent your sciatic nerve from getting irritated? There's a couple things you need to know, as we've always talked about. You need to definitely move well. What I mean by that is that if you sit for any significant amount of time throughout the day, if you sit for more than an hour or so at a time without getting up, it's likely that those discs are losing space, that you're creating arthritis and compression on those nerves. The other couple things that you might find with the sciatic nerve that will help prevent some of those things, but also is going to be making sure that you're staying mobile and flexible. If our spine becomes restricted and we don't move a lot, that means that your spine is slowly decaying and deteriorating. So exercise is so important. Some of the last things that I might suggest is going to be that if your spine has had injuries in the past, you're going to have to do something to try to prevent those things from becoming more of an issue. So getting checked regularly at your chiropractor is a huge deal. So how do we make sure that we're loosening up the nerves of the spine? That's going to be my focus today, is what stretches are necessary so that we don't compress and tension the spine. Well, the number one stretch that everyone has shown with sciatic problems is typically what we call a glute stretch, which means we're going to stretch this glute muscle out, or the piriformis muscle. There's a muscle that goes right across here and attaches to here, and the nerve comes right across there. If that muscle's super tight, you get compression. We're first going to show you the piriformis or figure 4 stretch. That's the very first one we're going to talk about to try to prevent tension in there. Most people that have sciatic issues have tension in their glutes. If you've been adjusted by me, you know it, because I've probably poked on knots in your glute that need to be stretched out. So how do we do that? Well, you could do it in a seated position. That's number one. A seated position, very simply, you would take your leg, your one ankle, let's say your right ankle, and put it right on top of your knee. You guys can all try to do this if you're sitting there and have room. You might put your leg out first straight, because if you are very inflexible, you may only be able to get your foot to here, or maybe you can get a little higher. The ultimate position we'd love to have it is in this position where you're a nice figure 4 and you're upright, just like that. When your foot and ankle is on your knee, you want your spine to be straight. You want even a curve in there. But if I want to, then I can lean. Really, I'm going to hinge my chest right toward my thigh and my calf, just like so. Some people may be very flexible and get really low, but what I don't want is this hunch. I'm not trying to curl my spine. I'm trying to keep a very strong, healthy curve in my back, and I lunge forward. The ideal is to do it about 3 times a day. You want to hold the stretch for probably a good 30 seconds, and how we usually count that is with breathing. If you can add breathing to the stretch, that helps. But when you're doing the stretch, what I would suggest is that you take a deep breath into your belly, really fill your belly up nice and tight, breathe out, lunge forward. Hold that for a couple seconds. Breathe in again, tighten. You're tightening your glutes, you're tightening your abdominal muscles, and then breathe out and lean a little further. If you do that 3 times to 5 times, it's about 30 seconds. And not only are you getting a good stretch, you're actually helping your mind. Number 2 is going to be the psoas stretch, or hip flexor. Why are we stretching the front of my body when my back hurts, Doc? I've got pain in my back. Well, let me tell you, because there's a muscle, that piriformis muscle attaches down here in your hip, and it comes all the way up into your spine, all the way up into your lumbar spine. It attaches to all these little transverse process. One actually attaches to your rib, one piece of this muscle. And it comes all the way down and even attaches to another muscle, and they create the iliopsoas muscle. If that muscle's super tight for someone who sits all day, meaning that I have an attachment to my spine and to my hip here, those points of insertion, they get closer when I'm sitting. They're further apart when I stand. So when I sit, this muscle shrinks. And if the muscle that goes from here to here shrinks and gets closer, well, I could walk around like this, but we're not going to. Our legs are going to stay straight and they're going to pull me forward. And that's going to start to create a problem in my sciatic nerve. So what we need to do is stretch those open. And how we're going to do that is the psoas stretch. If my spine is being pulled forward and increasing that tilt, we're irritating the sciatic nerve. So the number 2 and most important stretch is the psoas stretch, which is a hip flexor stretch. You could kneel down and just kind of lunge forward, which is a nice stretch to this front here. Very nice stretch. A lot of my patients have trouble getting down on their knee too sometimes. So just a lunge onto the knee may be too much, but we're going to show you kind of what you would do with that. Is you're going to try to make sure that your knee doesn't go over top of your ankle. You want that foot way out there, and you're just going to try to lunge forward. Again, keeping a good curve in my back, not too much, not too little, but the right curve, and we lunge forward. The pro tip to this one is that this muscle, because of its tension, usually tilts your pelvis too much. So what you're going to try to do is take your pubic bone and just tuck it up. You're going to tilt your pelvis just a little bit while you lunge forward, and you'll feel so much more in the front. So you try to tuck that tailbone underneath and you lunge forward. Now you can do the same thing standing. So if I'm trying to stretch that right leg, one thing that I see a lot of people do is their legs start too close together, and they might even have their foot out, and they try to lunge and they go, I just don't feel anything, Doc. You need to really get a wide stance, as wide as you can. We don't want this knee to drive past my toes. So the wider the better. The more that the back foot is facing forward, usually the better stretch you'll feel. And if you all you're gonna do is slide or glide your hips forward to the point, trying to keep your heel on the ground, gliding that forward. I'm really stretched apart. My feet are kind of on skis, and I'm just lunging forward, just like so. Again, if I tuck that tailbone underneath and I hold that, you're gonna get the stretch that you're looking for. If those stretch open, you're standing more upright, less here, more here. That's gonna be the difference. And when your spine is in proper alignment from the side, you have nice curvature of your spine. It's like a spring to gravity's pressure. You wanna absorb gravity. So the psoas, front muscle, huge when it comes to rehab and helping sciatic problems or back pain, period. I mean, these same things can help back pain too, not just sciatica. Last but not least, the hamstring stretch. Most people's hamstrings, okay, attached to this bone right here, go all the way down past your knee actually. Those muscles can get very tight and pull a lot of the pelvis in the wrong direction. So we're gonna do a stretch with that. These muscles are very strong. There's a number of them in here, but your hamstrings need to be stretched out. And what that means, this is why we do the simple test. We see if you can touch your toes, but we're gonna challenge you tonight a little bit and say, hey, could you touch your toes with your back curved, not just flex like this? I could do that all day long, but with my back straight, I'm gonna probably only be about here. So with a hamstring stretch, we want to make sure that your knees are slightly bent, but pretty much extended. You've got that proper curve, keep your head upright, and you're going to try to focus with your eyes. You wanna look kind of up to the ceiling, or at least where the ceiling meets the wall. I'm gonna keep my head forward and looking upwards. I'm keeping a curve here. You can put your hand right there and here just to make sure you don't lose it. If you feel it rounding, you're doing it wrong. Keeping that good curve here. You're gonna stretch forward. I'm looking up at the ceiling. I just let my hands dangle. They kind of add weight to this. But I'll get to a point where I can't really lunge forward without rounding. At that point, I'm gonna take a deep breath in, and you don't need to stare and extend your head so hard. If that's pretty high up there, just keep your head neutral with your shoulders and just look straight ahead. You don't have to look way up. But I want you to breathe in. You almost should feel your belt tighten if you got a belt on, or your waistband when you breathe in your belly. And when you breathe out, you just let that drop a little further. Again, at least 3 reps of this. But I'm maintaining a curve in my back. Your hamstrings, with a slow movement and a stretch, start to let go. And they stop pulling here, which happens to a lot of people's posture. I see almost everyone here stretching these out. We want this all loosened. Could you foam roll all the areas I'm talking about? Your hamstrings, your hip flexors, and your glutes? Absolutely. But those 3 areas, hip flexors, glutes, and hamstrings, are 3 of the areas that they affect your hip motion. So do your adductors. Let's do an adductor stretch. We're gonna add a 4th because I can tell you that most people, their hips become so tight that their hips, it starts to affect their back, and their back starts to have more subluxation due to a lack of good hip mobility. The hips are not moving properly. And the hips, we went through the 3 of the 4 muscles that affect your hips. We're gonna do the 4th muscle. The 4th muscles go from your pubic bones here and come right down into the inner part of your muscle. It's your thigh. You know, the ability to bring your leg outward. But those muscles, if they're loose, you can bring your hips way out, a split, right? Those adductors, the tighter they are, the more they hunker this down and don't allow good motion. And it's really the hidden muscle that affects most people's back problems and hip problems is their inner thigh, it's their groin muscle or their adductors. It's been said in yoga that most people hold fear in their hips, especially their adductors. So your emotions affect muscles in your body. The hips, typically, they're going to hold that. And most people, they don't like to give that up. That fear is real and it's long-standing. So that's why we need to start to loosen those up. We're just going to do a simple lunging stretch. So this is also called, I think, a goalie stretch or just kind of a lunge stretch. But if you spread your hips apart a little bit so that you could do like a hamstring stretch you could do, we're going to actually do this where your knee is going to try to come over top of your foot and this other foot stays pointing that way. So we're just going to lunge sideways. And what I'm doing, and I'm trying to keep my pelvis right on top of my hips here. I'm not trying to go forward. I want to keep it high and I'm trying to go really low. I'm so inflexible in this one. Normal folks probably are like way down, all right? Not me, but this is right there. So I'm pushing down here, same breath work, drop in. But I'm trying to keep my feet pointing forward and my knee over top of my feet there on this one. And I should feel a stretch right in here, that adductor. So if we're trying to go this way, what can happen is if you're real tight, you might try to put your foot out that way and you're not going to feel as much of a stretch. So you keep those feet pointed towards you and you can come this way. One thing you could kind of, some people, if you're having troubles with it, you can put your foot up on something. Don't do it on this kind of thing, but it gives you a little bit more ability to come forward without lunging that way. So you could put it as high as on a chair, but you just kind of lunge just like so. And what you're trying to do is keep your upright posture, hips tight, that pelvis and that tailbone tucked under, and you're just stretching forward. You're getting all here. This one can be challenging, so you really pay attention to your back and your position. That's why I didn't want to show it at first. But you now hit all 4 quadrants of your hips and your hamstrings. And if you do that, you've now loosened your hips and given your back some freedom to move. If your back's free, you've got more freedom for your sciatic nerve, ultimately. We're all set for tonight's workshop. As always, we appreciate you here. We hope that this benefits you in ways that we couldn't imagine. Have a good night.